One thing I always thought was fun, and people don't really know or catch, and a lot of people don't even know what the lightsaber styles are. You know, the casual fan won't even know what we're talking about, which is basically they developed. I'm not really sure who came up with it, but someone, and I guess George Lucas said, "Yes, this is awesome." Basically, developed that there were 7 different fighting styles. For Jedi lightsaber techniques. It's not just you're trained to use a lightsaber. You train in certain different styles, and each style has a purpose, has a reason, and strengths and weaknesses.
Yes.
And, you know, if you want to briefly go over them, because like I said, most people, or the casual fan will never have heard of them before.
Sure, if you want.
Sure.
Well, there's 7 forms, and the first one is Form 1. It's called Shii-Cho. And basically, remember that scene in the New Hope where Luke is practicing with the little rotor droid?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what Shii-Cho is for. It's like the most basic form, and basically what it teaches you is... Well, actually, it's kind of interesting. It teaches you the basics, but if you master Form 1, you're basically a one-man army in some ways, because it teaches you to deflect blasters and to deal with large groups. So essentially, you know, if you get cornered by a bunch of people and you're a Shii-Cho master, you're set.
Right.
But it does have a very severe drawback, is that it teaches you to deal with multiple enemies, and it teaches you to be very random, and it teaches you to be very precise. But against single enemies, it's terrible. Like, it's terrible.
Right. I mean, I assume if you're strong enough, you can make up for it, like Fisto, but
yeah, and you can make up for it with like strength training or studying other styles, but you know, there's an inherent weakness in I think every style, and I think every style has its own strengths. You know, Form 2, Makashi, that's used by Dooku, and what it is it's geared specifically towards lightsaber dueling, and it's all about elegance, and it's all about, you know, precision. It's very, you know, it's like the aristocratic
right. It's like fencing was.
Bingo, and it even uses actually fencing styles, you know, one-handed strikes and chops and that sort of thing. So its only real weakness is it's not too great against people who are just hammering at you, because it's like, you know, if it's like an aristocratic style and you fight a guy who's like a barbarian, it's not gonna, it's not the,
and it's not very good at blaster deflection either, I think.
No, it is not. It is not very good. I remember that. Form 3.
My favorite.
Why?
Partly just because if I were to actually study, I think that's what I would want to study. I'm a very big defensive guy, and plus, I mean, Obi-Wan makes a great case for it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Soresu, Form 3.
Yes.
And basically what it is it's basically a shield in a lot of ways. It's basically geared toward a tight move set, using very little stamina, great for blast deflection. It's kind of just like, you know, you're wearing the other guy out. And yeah, Obi-Wan is Mr. Soresu.
Mm-hmm.
And he's taken that style to the nth degree.
Now, is it true? I think I read this somewhere that he used to be Ataru, and then when Qui-Gon died, he kind of realized his mistakes and said, you know what, I'm going to study Soresu.
That's kind of half true. You see, Qui-Gon uses Ataru, and he did train Obi-Wan to use it. But Obi-Wan was studying Soresu before Qui-Gon's death. Qui-Gon's death did show him how he should retool some of his fighting styles, but he was still an avid practitioner of Soresu before his master's death.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and Form, like I said, Ataru, Form 5. Basically, a lot of jumps, a lot of kicks, a lot of movement. You know, it's used by Yoda and it's used by Qui-Gon. Very powerful, very powerful. And are we up? And then there's let's see,
that was 4. Yeah. So now
there's
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Was that we were at Ataru,
4,
right?
which was Ataru, yeah. So then there's 5.
Right. Juyo, I remember now. Anakin Skywalker. Oh no, that's Niman. My mistake.
Right. Doesn't Form 5 have like an offshoot of it too? Like okay, if I remember correctly, Form 5.
Shien. Oh yeah, Shien / Djem So.
Right.
It has two offshoots. It's one of the few styles that does have an offshoot.
And that one was just a more aggressive style of Soresu, right?
Pretty much. You know, essentially it made up for Soresu's lack of offense.
Right.
Which is part of the reason. Yeah, it's part of the reason Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan make such an effective team, because they compensate for each other. Obi-Wan compensates for Anakin's lack of defense, and Anakin compensates for Obi-Wan's lack of offense.
Right. Now, if I understand it correctly, the not Djem So, but I think the first one, Shien. It's basically Soresu blaster deflection, but instead of just deflecting it, you're trying to deflect it back at them. Yeah, redirect.
Yes, that is true.
And then, isn't the other one? What is it? I can't.
Juyo.
No.
Oh, the offshoot or the other style?
The offshoot.
Oh, Djem So.
Isn't that kind of like the same thing, but for lightsabers? It's
Bingo.
A variation of Soresu, but redirecting the attack towards them.
Bingo.
So, would you say that Soresu is still the better defensive one?
Yes.
Okay. So they're sacrificing.
It's geared entirely for defense, and that way it's not leaving anything open.
Right.
Because Shien can leave certain aspects open, but with Soresu, you have a brick wall defense.
I think that's my favorite, simply because if you kind of like what Obi-Wan does, if you use that as your basis, and then know enough of the others to be able to switch over to something else, then, I mean...
You're pretty much set.
Yeah, that's pretty much the... I mean, I know it's got its weaknesses and that it has no attack whatsoever, but, yeah. I mean... Yeah.
But it's great for... I know what you mean. It's great for stamina, and it's great for intermixing.
I mean, that's pretty much how he beat Anakin. One thing I think is really cool, and you guys can do this, I did this too after I read the styles and forums, is that most of the movies, at least the later movies, and I think Clone Wars, from what I've seen so far, they actually follow these styles. When they choreograph the moves and when they do the action pieces, they actually try, like if you look at Obi-Wan, he does do very tight, controlled, defensive. Anakin's very much more aggressive, so they actually do.
Oh yeah, they do that on purpose.
And you can see in the third movie, Revenge
of the Sith.
Revenge of the Sith, thank you. That's how Obi-Wan beat Anakin. He just outlasted him.
In a lot of ways, yes.
Because, oh my god, that was a long fight.
yes, it was.
But
that's one of Soresu's advantages. You could go for a very long time. Great for stamina.
And then, so 5 is kind of the more offensive version of Soresu. Not quite as good at defense, but it has more attack options. And then there's 6.
Niman, Form 6.
Isn't that the most popular, or at least the most popular during the Clone War era?
In a lot of ways, because it takes what it basically is it's like a jack of all trades style, and it takes bits and pieces from every single style, so it makes for a very versatile fighter. And it's also a gateway for Jarkai dual blade fencing. So basically, 2 lightsabers or double bladed lightsabers.
Which is, I know it's rare during the movie era. Was it always rare? Like, it doesn't seem like it's very rare during Swtor's age.
What was double bladed lightsabers?
Yeah, double-bladed,
or 2 lightsabers?
Both.
It's always been rare in its own way. I mean, there are some areas that have them more than others, but it really depends. Especially in the Clone Wars era, it is more rare. But it's never been, as I guess quote unquote popular as the single blade for the Jedi.
I guess it makes sense. I mean, lightsabers are hard enough to control as it is.
Oh yeah, I mean, using a saber staff is not easy. I know Darth Maul makes it look easy.
Yeah.
But it's actually very difficult because you have to be aware of the 2 blades the entire time. And another thing too, if you're holding 2 individual lightsabers, you have a lot less power because you're basically limited to fighting one-handed.
Right.
And the reason most Jedi use 2-handed grips is the way a lightsaber is designed. It's not light.
I
know the blade weighs nothing, but those hilts do weigh actually a decent amount.
I would think that dual-bladed lightsabers would be much more useful for like going up against blasters and the like, because you have basically more blades to block with, and kinetic force is not really so much an issue there. But against other Jedi users or Sith, yeah.
Yeah, well, in a lot of that is true in some ways, but with a saber staff, it's not the easiest to deflect blaster bolts because
I can imagine. Yeah,
you'd have to twirl it around you, which not only takes a lot of stamina, but you're also leaving yourself wide open.
I've noticed that in a lot of versus videos, yours and especially
Yes.
The saber staff is almost its disadvantages basically even out with its advantages.
In a lot of ways. I mean, it depends really how it's designed. You know, because that pommel in the middle is like a massive target, and a lot of saber staffs are designed at different lengths, so it's a give and take sort of
That's
thing.
true. XR Kun didn't have one, but God, I would love to see XR Kun fight, because I have no idea how you would fight with a double-bladed lightsaber with a single length pommel.
He's essentially fighting with a spear.
Yeah,
in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, I would just love to see a battle of that. I just can't picture that in my mind's eye. XR Kun, for those of you who don't know, he was a very good Sith Lord. Good? Well, that's a bad word to use.
He was an ancient Sith Lord from the Tales of the Jedi comic book series.
Yes, and he used a double-bladed lightsaber like Darth Maul, except the length of the hilt was only the length of a regular lightsaber's hilt.
Yep.
And it was said that, you know, he could use it because he was really badass with it. But the average Jedi would probably not be able to use such a weapon.
No, his lightsaber stands out a lot among a lot of Sith and a lot of Jedi, and he's really, man, just when I think about his fighting style, it is very different.
So, okay, and then so there was Nipan, and then there was we should finish the Niman, sorry.
And then there's Juyo / Vaapad if you're a Mace Windu fan.
Right.
And it's basically the I'm gonna kill you style. Very, very aggressive, and it's mainly used by Sith, and it's commonly referred to as a Sith style. It's basically the, I'm gonna just charge in and destroy you sort of style. Incredibly aggressive.
And basically, from what I understand, if I'm understanding correctly,
yes,
you channel the aggression and anger and whatnot of your enemy, kind of like a conduit of you. It's not touching you per se, but you're channeling it back onto them.
That's Vaapad, not Juyo.
That's Vaapad. Okay, so Juyo is now. I know that it's characterized by just completely staccato movements, so it's very hard to predict. Like, you don't flow from one move to the next. You just
you just go in there and you want to see your enemy destroyed.
Which is one thing that I thought was kind of interesting, because a lot of people in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, people looked at what Mace Windu was doing and saying, "This guy sucks. Look at his moves are so jerky." But that was the whole point. The whole point was that his moves were very jerky, because how do you predict moves when they're not connected to each other?
Exactly. That's the point. It's not supposed to be elegant. It's not supposed to be, a practice sort of thing. No, it's supposed to be, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to dispense you very quickly.
And Vaapad, which is what Mace Windu created himself.
Yes. It's an open channel, essentially. It takes all his inner darkness and all the inner darkness of the opponent and sends it back out again.
Now, would you say that it turned Mace Windu in probably not just his era, but one of the best lightsaber duelists of all time?
Oh, most definitely. I would definitely rank him up there in some of the best duelists ever.
I'm curious, I know I hate doing top fives because I know it's so hard to do, but because I know a lot of times in your videos you'll say one of the greatest of their era. What about of all eras? If there was like the...
I would still put Mace Windu in that top 10.
Okay.
Like, so of all eras, he would still be in there.
Maybe Yoda.
Actually, most definitely Yoda.
I'm curious, have you seen, how do you, I cannot pronounce his YouTube name. He does Djem So, thank you. The one where he says Yoda's not as good as people think.
I've seen it.
What are your views on that? Because I have some interesting
This is so ironic, because my next Versus video, I'm not going to spoil, but it has Yoda in it. And people have asked me about that particular video that he's made, and I'm going to be perfectly honest and say I do not agree with it in a lot of ways. Like, I think I'm not saying it's a not a well-made video. I think it was very thorough, and I agree. I do think he did have a point or two in some regards, but I honestly do not agree with a lot of his opinions. And I've actually talked with some other Star Wars YouTubers, and they don't really I'm not going to name names obviously because that wouldn't be very nice.
Well,
but they don't really agree with that video either.
And one thing I love about him is that he's not arrogant at all. He's always very clear that it's just his opinion. He's not always right. For
the most part, yeah.
My one thing, and I'm thinking that it's not so much that his logic is flawed, but there's another way of looking at it. My biggest thing was when he said that Yoda didn't really make his own style or adapt the styles. He just got really good at the set styles. Yeah. And so he uses Ataru, but when he's pressed, he switches instantly to Soresu instead of adapting Ataru to be more defensive. And my thought behind that was, isn't that kind of the opposite? Isn't that a mark of just how good he was? He didn't have to adapt Ataru to some new form. He was so good at all of them that he could seamlessly go from the best offensive to the best defensive without having to try and compensate for weaknesses.
Yeah, exactly. Mixing and changing styles, you should only do that if you have to.
Right.
If you're good enough to, if the tool is there, you use it. If something's really good at defense, why would I jerry-rig my own style to be defensive when I could just up and use what I have in front of me?
That was exactly what I was thinking. I was like, yes, if people, with the exceptions of, Vaapad, which is really kind of its own thing.
Of course.
If I'm trying to modify, let's say, Makashi to deflect blaster bolts, it's because it's easy. Yeah, it's easier for me to do that than to seamlessly switch to Soresu. So I have to because that's what I'm comfortable with. But if I can instantly go from Makashi to Soresu, I say that's a mark of a better duelist. Because why develop your own style when you can just go from the best to the best? So yeah, so I guess we were thinking along the same lines there. Good. I'm glad I wasn't the only one thinking that. I see his logic.
Believe me, I know for a fact that you're not.
I see his logic, and it is logical. I just think that there's another way of approaching it.
Not only that, all that thing with Yoda's stamina and all that stuff. That's the only part that I think he's just straight up wrong about. Here's the thing, and a lot of people don't really know this. He says Yoda's crippling arthritis and his cane and all that stuff. Let me tell you this. There have been several sources, and this makes sense, in novels like Yoda Dark Rendezvous, and even the Revenge of the Sith novel that he loves so much. Mm-hmm. Yoda only uses, for the most part, I don't say entirely, but his cane is just for show, in some ways.
Right.
He's excruciatingly old. Yes, he has some mild arthritis. Is he a gimp? Not even close. If he wanted to, he wouldn't have to use the cane. He only uses the cane, sometimes when he has to.
A lot of people,
his stamina is far from a little, and he's actually in a lot better physical shape than I think a lot of people give him credit for, because he is actually a capable unarmed combatant as well. If you've read the Revenge of the Sith novel and a few other novels, he could kill you without his lightsaber and without the Force.
Oh yeah. The way I always looked at it was, and this is kind of drawing on a completely different era, but during the was it the Hand of Thrawn books? There was a perfect thing. It was Mara Jade, and I think it was Jacen Solo, and she basically, he was using the Force for everything. He was using it to move boxes and all that. And she was telling him that
I remember.
Because the Force, even though you can use it for everything, you shouldn't. It's excessive. You should learn to live your life without using the Force and only use the Force when you need to. And that's what I always imagined with Yoda, is that if he wanted to, he could use a little bit of his Force and walk fine all day, every day, but he feels that's not showing off, using it more than it should be and not in a way it should be used. So I think that, normally he probably doesn't need the cane. It just makes life easier for him, and so that's why he does it, because he doesn't feel that he should use the Force all the time. But yeah, I agree. His stamina is probably...